I did it again. See, my mute button is like my downfall right now, you guys. Welcome to Fridays in Trumpland again. Here we are. You all know that's the name of my Substack now, my new Substack feature, Fridays in Trumpland. But welcome to Resistance Live. It is a Friday in Trumpland. It's also Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And it's, I don't know. I'm a lawyer, as I think everybody knows, and I was trained as a lawyer in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that I learned in my very first year was about the functionality of the DOJ, because the folks who taught me legal research and writing, which is kind of like a basic entry-level 1L class, were actually civil attorneys in the DOJ civil division. And so what has happened in the last 24 hours with regard to this corruption scandal involving Eric Adams, and I will just say that I talked about this on a broadcast 3 days ago, so you should all go check it out, because I outlined the whole background of this whole thing. What has happened inside the DOJ is absolutely unprecedented, and it's still going on. There was breaking news about this like 45 minutes ago about what's happening there today. So we're going to talk about all of that. We have stuff to talk about with regard to Musk and the GOP and the budget and all sorts of other things. But first things first, today for our visually challenged viewers, I am wearing a cream-colored sweater. My hair is down. I have my thin gold hoops in. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman, and I'm in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart and the big cushy chair. And I'm coming to you from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land, as always. All right, so let's talk about the story here with the DOJ, because I have to say that I know everyone was talking about Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre last night. That involved 2 DOJ officials. Where we are right now is utterly unprecedented territory. So let's just back up so everybody understands what happened here. Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, was indicted by Biden's DOJ as a Democrat a little over like almost a year ago. And that was the first indictment. There's been a whole series of indictments since, okay? Fundamentally, he's been accused of taking money from foreign entities to advocate and provide them with benefits as the mayor of New York, okay? Violation of FARA, various other corruption allegations met. Literally almost every single person inside the inner circle of Eric Adams' administration has either been indicted or forced to resign. Before any of this began, this was a corruption scandal here in New York City beyond what anybody had, I think, ever seen before. And that's saying a lot, because there's been a lot of corrupt New York politicians, okay? This was a whole other level, to the point where a lot of leverage was being used to try to get Eric Adams out of office before any of this went down. Okay, so Trump gets elected. Eric Adams immediately starts acting like he's angling for a pardon. However, as I'm going to remind you all, you kind of can't get a pardon, or you're not supposed to get a pardon, or there are debates about whether or not pardons can be enforceable if you haven't already been convicted of a crime. Preemptory pardons happen. Biden issued a few. But this was a situation where he was being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Now, I'm going to remind you all, for those who don't know, our DOJ is kind of like the largest law firm in the country. And the way that it works is there are local U.S. attorney's offices for each district, okay? And they have someone designated as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, or the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, or the U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey. That's the head of that particular branch, so to speak, of the DOJ. And then there are lesser deputy U.S. attorneys, rather, and assistant U.S. attorneys working within each of those branches, so to speak, okay? Now, the Southern District of New York is notoriously the most independent branch of the DOJ. It's also considered the most prestigious. People angle like through law school, through clerkships, to end up working for the SDNY, the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office, as it is referred to, okay? And this situation was no different, okay? So when Trump came into office, an acting U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York was placed by Trump into the leadership role there. Her name is Danielle Sassoon. And in case you're wondering whether or not this person, who was a Trump appointee, is like, you know, within the realm of woke, so to speak, as they like to use that word as a pejorative slur, she clerked for Justice Scalia. This is a woman who clerked for like arguably the most conservative Supreme Court justice in American history. Okay. She is not someone, she's like endorsed by the Federalist Society. She is not someone who is kind of like, you know, liberal wokeism embodied. Far from it. Okay. So Now you know the lay of the land. Eric Adams is being prosecuted by the Southern District of New York. After the election, Eric Adams starts angling for a pardon, okay? Meanwhile, Danielle Sassoon takes over the Southern District of New York and is in charge of those prosecutions against Eric Adams, okay? Now, in all of this, just so everybody understands the lay of the land, there has never been an accusation made that Eric Adams was wrongfully indicted. No one has ever claimed that, like, they didn't have a preponderance of the evidence necessary to indict him. Nobody has ever argued that they couldn't prove that he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary, okay? Nonetheless, Eric Adams starts angling to get closer and closer and closer to Donald Trump. And the point of leverage that Eric Adams has is that an enormous number of undocumented folks and other asylum seekers have been dumped in New York City over the last number of years by Governor Abbott of Texas and Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, among others, okay? And Eric Adams was elected as the mayor of New York in part on a platform that said he would protect immigrants. So what does Eric Adams do? Well, he's worried about going to prison for potentially the rest of his life. And so he uses the one bargaining chip that he has left, and that is ICE access to undocumented people in New York City. Now, I'm just going to say one thing. New York City has always also been a sanctuary city. And unlike the mayors of other major sanctuary cities around the country, Eric Adams has already not prevented ICE from being able to raid locations inside New York City. Okay. Kristi Noem did a whole photo op in a full flak jacket a couple of weeks ago where she was participating in an ICE raid. So Eric Adams has already kind of like stepped over the line here in the context of what New York City has always stood for in this regard. But then we add to the fact that, and this is what I was talking about 3 days ago, Eric Adams then called a meeting of all of the senior staff of the New York City administration. And he told people, one, that they were not allowed to defy orders from ICE, and they were to participate as local officials in anything that they were asked to do by the federal government through ICE. And second, he told all of them that they were not allowed to criticize Trump on social media. A couple hours after that, it was announced that charges against Eric Adams would be dropped. Now, that was a huge enough scandal in and of itself because you could see the quid pro quo right out there in the middle of everything, right? It was entirely obvious what was going on, okay? But it got worse because what we know now is that Emile Beauvais, who you all will remember was one of the defense attorneys for Donald Trump during his trial involving the 34 counts of fraudulent documents related to his payoff of Stormy Daniels to influence the 2016 election, Emile Beauvais is now the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And apparently he held a meeting with Danielle Sassoon in her role as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and several of her staff were in attendance. And during that meeting, he ordered her to file papers with the judge dismissing the indictments. Okay. And on top of that, in the middle of the meeting, he saw one of Sassoon's associates taking notes. And apparently during that meeting, he said, he gave kind of the side eye on that and then demanded that the notes be collected at the end of the meeting because he didn't want any evidence of what was going on. And in that meeting, what became absolutely clear was that Eric Adams was demanding that the charges be dropped in exchange for cooperation with Trump's ICE initiatives. Okay. There is no ethical or legal basis to dismiss an indictment in exchange for cooperation with the president's policy initiatives. There's no justification for it whatsoever. And in fact, as Danielle Sassoon recognized, her entire bar license could be on the line for filing in that situation. There are codes of ethics that lawyers have to live by, right? If you don't live by that code of ethics, you can be disbarred. And if you're disbarred, your whole career is over. So she decided to challenge Emile Beauvais on the potential filing of papers to dismiss the indictment. And she did it through an 8-page letter that was published by the New York Times yesterday afternoon. It is, in addition to the fact that it is incredibly well-reasoned, it's written like a legal brief. I know for many of you, if you looked at it, a lot of it sounded like legalese. So let me just say this to you all, okay? It is an incredibly compelling and well-documented argument for why she cannot ethically dismiss the charges against him. And it notes that there was never any argument that he was properly indicted. There was never any argument that they could prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and that she could not ethically or legally dismiss the indictments against him in exchange for his cooperation on Trump's policy initiatives. That, by the way, would be not just corrupt, not just unethical, but actually illegal, because it constitutes obstruction of justice. And she said to Emile Beauvais, I understand that you've told me that, if I don't comply, I have to step aside. So if you won't rethink this, please consider this to be my resignation. And he accepted her resignation and wrote an absolutely bizarre letter back to her about why it was that she had to be loyal essentially to Donald Trump. Since then, just wait, it gets worse. Emile Beauvais has been running around the Justice Department trying to find someone who will file the dismissal of the indictment and sign it. The problem is that anybody who signs that will also be putting their bar license on the line, could completely destroy their entire career by doing that, okay? And so since Danielle Sassoon has resigned, the head of the DOJ Criminal Division, also a Trump appointee, has resigned. The head of the DOJ Public Integrity Section, also a Trump appointee, has resigned. And at this point, 5 more attorneys inside the DOJ have tendered their resignation. The most recent one is a fellow by the name of Hagen Scotton. And again, I got to point this out. These are not liberal Democrats. These are not lifers inside the DOJ. This guy clerked for Chief Justice John Roberts. And in a letter that he wrote this morning, tendering his resignation, he essentially said to Emile Beauvais, you will either find a fool or a coward to sign these papers, but it was never going to be me. I mean, just absolute immolation of the positions of the DOJ. So the latest breaking news from like 45 minutes ago is that Emile Beauvais has now lined up every remaining attorney in, and by the way, he put everybody in the SDNY who had worked on this case on administrative leave. So even if they didn't quit, they now are locked out of their offices and locked out of their computers and essentially are like, they're still getting paid, but they're not allowed to work. Okay. So it's scorched earth now. 45 minutes ago, it broke that he has lined up every remaining attorney in the DOJ Public Integrity Section and said that they have essentially a ticking clock to find an attorney who will sign the request for the indictment to be dismissed, or he's firing everybody. Okay, so that's where we are right now. Now, let me explain a couple things about this in context, okay? In any other circumstance, this would take down Emile Beauvais, the Deputy Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and probably the President. Okay, but we're not living in like the old times any longer. Okay, this is them essentially strong-arming the DOJ, ethical, incredibly well-educated. Like Hagen Scotton went to Harvard Law. He served two tours as a special forces soldier. Okay, these are not people who like take their responsibilities and their ethics lightly. All right, he is essentially strong-arming the people that Trump himself put into place to get them to use the DOJ as Trump's own personal weaponry. And frankly, I mean, appalling is too kind a word to attach to this. Like, if you're looking at this as an attorney, let alone someone who has known people who has practiced inside the DOJ like I have, it feels like the whole place is being burnt to the ground, like in real time, to try to effect a version of the Department of Justice that will bend to the will of Donald Trump and his people. I'm going to say a couple other things about this because people need to be aware. Wrapping up those notes at the end of that meeting and destroying them is obstruction of justice. Emile Beauvais has interfered in the prosecution now of Eric Adams to the point that it is arguably criminal. Judge Ho is the judge in the Southern District of New York who is assigned to this case. And since last night, there's been a lot of speculation about whether Judge Ho is going to pull Emile Beauvais into court and demand some answers. But in addition to that, just so everybody understands how this works, state licensing organizations like state bars, let me back up for a second because there's a lot of confusion about this. The ABA does not license lawyers, okay? The American Bar Association is a voluntary organization that pretty much every lawyer in the country joins, but that's not how you get your bar license. You get your bar license by passing the bar exam in a state where you then are sworn in by the Supreme Court of that state. And then after that, you can apply for admission to the federal courts if you're going to engage in federal practice, all right? So the way that people get disbarred is a complaint is filed with the State Bar Association, okay? So for me, I'm a member of the New York Bar and a bunch of other states. Complaints filed in the New York Bar go through a whole investigation process, and then there are hearings, and then there's a determination of what the penalty should be. If I were Emile Beauvais, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be that man, but let me just say this. I would be very concerned about the future of my bar license right now. In addition to the fact that the judge may call me into court and sanction me or hold me in criminal contempt. So this is way beyond the place of like everyday attempts to influence outcomes, okay? We are now well into the territory of allegedly criminal activity by the highest levels of the DOJ. And I have to say something here because, you know, this is something that I've been thinking about all morning. It takes an enormous amount of courage and a very strong ethical backbone to do what Danielle Sassoon and Hagen Scotton and all of these other lawyers have done at the DOJ, because they are unwilling to allow the rule of law to be eroded and their own careers to be set on fire for the sake of the policy initiatives of this president, with the admission, by the way, that they voted for him. Hagen Scotton, in this letter that just like basically sets Emile Beauvais on fire, says, you may think that I oppose Trump's policy initiatives. Quite the contrary, but I'm still not going to do your dirty work. So we're at a place right now where like nobody knows exactly how this is going to end. I do have to answer one question that was asked this morning on the Patreon feed about why isn't it better if they don't quit? So I really want people to grasp this from the standpoint of how this looks through the lens of being an attorney, okay? Your bar license, if you are a practicing lawyer, okay, is the only thing that stands between you and the end of your career. Okay? You can't practice law in America if you've been disbarred by any bar association, because here's how this works. You get disbarred by one bar association, it gets reported to any other bar association and or court in the country, okay? You're done. Your license gets pulled, you'll never practice law again. So their choice, fundamentally, the choice that they were given was quit or end your career by doing something illegal that you know is illegal and unethical because you're being ordered to do it, okay? It takes an enormous backbone to stand up like this. And that's a choice that would be easy for any attorney. Any attorney could look at that and say, that's a no-brainer. I am not giving up my entire career to do something that I know is illegal and unethical. No. So, you know, I know there are people that they're like, they should stay and fight, but they're not being allowed to stay and fight. That's the other thing. Even the people who didn't like write the letter that Danielle Sassoon wrote have been placed on administrative leave and locked out of their jobs. And it's a matter of minutes before their careers are going to be over. And it doesn't, let me just say one other thing. Is it better to be fired or to quit? Well, she wrote an 8-page letter that got published in the New York Times that explained literally down to the cited cases of why she couldn't sign an indictment. That was published for everybody to see. She is, in essence, like a whistleblower now. That's one way to think about it. A very high-tiered whistleblower. And she can't do that if she gets fired, because they will argue that she was fired for cause. This is how you kind of like, you know, open the window on everything that's going on and let the air in. So I don't knock anybody. I don't knock anybody for resigning. In fact, I think it is like an incredibly moral and ethical stance. And any attorney with any belief in the ethical commitments that you make, the oath of office that you take, right? Anybody with any belief in that would do what these people are doing. The thing that is incredibly amazing about it, though, is that essentially it looks like Emile Beauvais is going to tear through the entire DOJ trying to find something to do trying to find somebody to do this illegal thing. And at this point, anybody who signs that document should be prepared to say bye-bye to their career. Like literally, they will lose their license because all of this is out in the open now and there's no excuse. No excuse anymore that you didn't know or that, you had to do it. That's not how any of this works. So we have yet to see what this is going to look like in terms of the actual outcome at the top of the DOJ. But I will just say this. Pam Bondi is in this, which we know she is. Emile Beauvais is obviously in this and now has witnesses who will testify against him. I would be deeply concerned about my future career prospects and other things because, statutes of limitations, I don't know, they might run longer than 4 years. So we have a ways to go on what the outcome of this is going to be, but please know this, all right? It kind of doesn't get any more dirty than this from the context of what's happening inside the DOJ. Emile Beauvais is literally strong-arming incredibly compelling, well-educated, qualified public servant lawyers into choosing between the end of their own careers and something illegal. That's what he's doing. It's gross. It's like mafioso style tactics in the form of law. And I just, I don't know. I'm really curious to see how this one plays out. There's literally breaking news on this every hour right now. So the story is quite far from over. Okay. So that's what's going on there. And frankly, the thing I'm waiting for, because the one thing I will say about this is that this has the flavor of a bit of a tipping point, because when you have people who are conservatives themselves saying essentially not doing this, and here's the 8-page reason why I'm not doing it, because you're unethical, amoral, and this is illegal, and nobody ever accused, I have no basis to do this legally. I can't do it legally. I will be breaking the law if I do it. That's something of a wake-up call, right? In essence, it's something that says to folks on that side of the fence, oh my God, this really is that bad. And what does that mean then in terms of how things crack up? Maybe not in the base, but in the support in other places in the government. Okay, so that brings me to the next topic that I wanted to talk about today. Somebody asked me a question on the Patreon feed. Big reminder that you can join us over at patreon.com/resistancelive if you want to ask me questions. I answer questions in writing or on the air for 3 hours before the broadcast. And it's as little as $5 a month, starts there. So that's 20 cents a broadcast. It's like the deal of the century. Okay. So somebody asked on the Patreon feed, why are GOP senators and representatives not standing up? Are they afraid for their lives? So, there was this interview Kirsten Gillibrand, I think it was, gave last week. There was something like they're terrified. And other senators and representatives said this. They're terrified. Their lives are being threatened. I just have something to say about this. Okay. Anybody in my position, right? And there's a handful of legal commentators out there and also other political commentators who have bigger platforms than I do, right? Every single one of us has gotten more death threats than we can count. Every single one of us. There was a window of time a couple of years ago where I was literally getting 2 or 3 very serious death and rape threats a day on social media. Okay. There is no excuse for, members of the House of Representatives and the Senate in the GOP to not be standing up if they have a conscience about what's happening. Okay. And I have kids. They have kids. I know there's this whole line of they need to protect their families. They have far more resources than I do for private security. So this whole thing of they're not doing it because they're afraid. I'm sorry. I have very little tolerance for that. Very little. The more likely explanation, there's actually 2, is that 1, they agree with all of it, right? Many of them have drunk the Kool-Aid, right? We're not back in the days of Ben Sass, who quit, right? Shortly after the Kavanaugh hearings, because he kind of couldn't stomach it anymore, right? Not Ben Sass. I'm thinking of somebody else. One of the GOP senators who stood up and actually caused that delay in Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, he quit because he couldn't take it, right? Just in the same way that Liz Cheney stood up and did the right thing. Not a fan of hers. We disagree on everything, but she has a backbone, right? The more logical explanation for why they're not standing up is that they actually like this, that they're in bed with all of it, right? Not that they're afraid, that they like it. Okay. And the other explanation is that a lot of them have gotten very rich. And that's the other thing I don't want people to neglect. There's been an enormous amount of dirty money floating into campaigns since the Citizens United decision. We know that the NRA was used as a funnel for Russian money into U.S. campaigns. People's bank statements have changed a lot over the last few years. And so that's the other thing that I want people to remember. Like, it could just be straight corruption. So I think we have to stop attributing like empathetic versions of reality to people who have truly shown us who they are, right? Marco Rubio was like threatened by Trump, right? He had death threats, and now he's the Secretary of State. I don't think that that's an excuse for any of it, honestly. So, you know, they are who they appear to be. They have shown us who they are, and we should believe them. Okay. They have an opportunity to be like Adam Kinzinger or to be like Liz Cheney, and they're not. They're not. And I don't know, man. On a day where we've seen people in the conservative side of things stand up and say no, why members of the GOP, if they have anything remotely close to that sense, can't do the same is completely beyond me. Just completely beyond me. Okay. Yesterday, we found out that Musk was inside the IRS, which I know for many people is like incredibly scary. But I will just say that, you know, anybody who's contributed to Social Security, your information was already available to them when they were inside the Social Security databases. So I think the IRS is a little bit more scary because people are like, oh, my Social Security number, but that is probably already compromised. The thing that's concerning about this is what's going to happen in terms of tax return money. And as somebody pointed out yesterday, the tax return delivery online thing was down yesterday when they were in there. So don't get me wrong, I'm very concerned about it. And it's deeply troubling. All right. And also, this is like the 10th time this has happened now. All right. And I don't know what it's going to mean going forward. People today were asking me on the Patreon feed, should I file on paper? Should I file electronically? Should I try to slow things down? Well, they're gutting that department just like every other department. All right. I don't think it's going to slow down or speed anything up. Yes, electronic returns are processed very quickly, but, you know, this is not something that I am deeply invested in right now. I'm more invested in leveraging how to get Elon Musk out of power, right? And you're not going to do that by filing your tax return on paper, okay? You can do it if you want to, but it's way more likely that making calls to your representatives and your senators is going to make more of a difference than doing that. So again, we'll have to see how this all unfolds, okay? But, you know, it is yet another sign of what they're up to and the danger of it. And we know that they're accessing information that they are not legally allowed to have access to. And again, there will be more lawsuits about that. All right. So speaking of which, I do want to just mention that action items for today have to include, as always, making calls to your representative, making calls to your senators to talk about Elon Musk. And if you want to get on there and say, nobody voted for Elon Musk to be in my tax information, I didn't vote for Elon Musk to have access to my Social Security number, go for it. Okay. Perfectly good talking point. No, I'm just going to continue to say this. It is nonpartisan. No one voted for Elon Musk. That's a great talking point if you have Republican senators or a Republican rep. Nobody voted for this. So continue to use that talking point. But in addition, I have a special request today for the New Yorkers, because we started out talking about the entire corruption scandal that's currently taking the DOJ apart at the seams. Okay. Kathy Hochul, who is the governor of New York, has the capacity to remove Eric Adams as the mayor of New York City. That would end this, okay? Because he would no longer be in power. Now, last week, when all of this was breaking, Kathy Hochul said, no, I feel like the election is the way to deal with this because New York City has an upcoming election. Today, by the way, New Yorkers, it's the last day to register if you want to vote in the primaries. You got to register today. So if you're a New Yorker and you are not registered to vote, go do it, okay? There's a primary coming up in May. And her view was this will all be dealt with in the election. I would rather not, you know, yank him out of there, even though she's entirely justified in doing it. Well, last night she was on Rachel Maddow, and she said something quite a bit different. Now, there were people on Blue Sky who were like, I didn't hear that, and that's fine. But everybody who's been paying attention to this from a journalistic standpoint really noticed the difference, okay? And the difference was that last night, after everything that has happened this week, and on the heels of, at that point, 5 attorneys inside the DOJ, it's now up to 8, quitting last night, she said, I'm going to consider every option. And what I hear in that is call Kathy Hochul. Call Kathy Hochul's office and tell her to remove Eric Adams, that this kind of corruption can't stand, that it is essentially allowing a criminal to run rampant through the DOJ and to like try to advocate for the arrest and detainment and deportation of people inside the United States, some of whom are here legally on asylum. By the way, there's some news in Guantanamo Bay. They now know that 3 people who were deported to Guantanamo last week were here legally on asylum claims. I don't know how they're ever going to get back, but they don't care any longer whether or not somebody is here on lawful status or unlawful status. So if you call Kathy Hochul, you live in New York, you call Kathy Hochul, you must advocate not just for the protection of people who are immigrants living inside New York City, but fundamentally for the protection of the rule of law in the state. She has an opportunity here to be a hero. And what that would look like is removing Eric Adams as the mayor of New York City. So that is a request I have for New Yorkers. Please do that if you have not yet done that so far. Okay. Other bits of news. Josh Shapiro, on behalf of the state of Pennsylvania, filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration yesterday because get this. Remember that whole spending freeze thing that now feels like it happened a year ago? Really, it was only 2 weeks. There's money that is owed to the state of Pennsylvania that is allocated for like basic needs of Pennsylvania that has not been distributed yet by the Trump administration because they're still acting like the freeze is in play. They're in defiance of a court order. So Josh Shapiro filed a case yesterday to try to get access to that money. Again, one of the backstops right now that's really significant is Democratic governors and the Democratic Governors Association. Okay. I'm pleased to see this. I think it's the right move. I knew Josh Shapiro before he ran for governor. I know his daughter. And I'm just going to say, like, Josh Shapiro does not back down from a fight. I think anybody who's watched him on the national stage knows that. And we will see what happens there next. Okay. All right. Last thing I want to talk about. I know a lot of you were really freaked out at my discussion about the SAVE Act yesterday, and justifiably so, right? The SAVE Act has this interpretation, if you missed yesterday's broadcast, that in essence talks about the fact that the proposal would be that in order to vote, you would have to present birth certificate, passport consistent with your current name. Okay. And obviously, if you're married and you changed your name when you got married, it's not going to be consistent with your birth certificate. We know that they've had their eyes on the 19th Amendment, which allows women to vote. This is one way that they might be able to disenfranchise a huge population of women without doing anything except passing the SAVE Act. Okay. You can also, by the way, call your representatives and your senators and tell them not to pass it. Like, that's a good talking point today. Okay. But the thing I'm going to say about this is, like, I know that this set off a lot of panic about, like, I'm a single woman and I have all my money and I'm worried about what's happening with the stock market, or I'm worried about what's going to happen if Elon thieves or they devalue the dollar. And so I'm not giving financial advice here. And I have to say this every time. I'm not qualified to do that. All right. You should talk to your financial services professionals if you have questions. Okay. The one thing that I will just say about this is that Project 2025, if you've read it or you've read summaries of it, you know that it put a target on the back of single women and single mothers because they don't actually want women to have independence, right? They want women to be in a position where they are subservient to a white male patriarchal agenda, all right? And by the way, I just have to point something out. You know, it's always been this way for Black and brown women in America, right? Like, can we just acknowledge that? There have always been concerns about this and the disenfranchisement of Black and brown women in America, and the fact that Black women did not get the right to vote in 1920 when white women did, right? So we have to acknowledge that some of this is like, you know, if you're white, this is new to you, but it really kind of shouldn't be, okay? The one thing I'm going to say about this is that we know what they've got their eyes on. Whether or not it will be successful is another matter, okay? But I think that this is a moment to carefully consider, right, where you're at, and do that with appropriate professionals. Don't get your information off the internet. Don't get your financial advice off of YouTube. Please go seek out the professionals that you rely on to make decisions about what to do with your money. Like, I would tell you that even if, like, everything was completely normal and stable and, like, the stock market was flying high, which it has been for forever, thanks to Joe Biden. But, you know, nonetheless, I understand the panic. And as I have warned repeatedly, okay, it is very dangerous right now to spin out into worst case scenarios because it puts us all in fight or flight mode, and reality is rough enough, okay? They're not trying right now to put women under the control of their closest male relative, okay? They're not trying right now to stop women from being able to own property and keep bank accounts. Okay. It wasn't all that long ago that that's how it was in the United States. You couldn't open a checking account as a single woman until 1972, which was after I was born. But all that said, they're not doing that right now. Okay. And so part of this moment, okay, is to stay very grounded in what's actually going on. Okay. We can't make good decisions as organizers, as activists, as human beings, if what we're doing is spinning out about what could be coming next. Okay. And there's enough going on right now to worry about. Okay. So I just want to have like a little bit of a moment of like recentering everyone, because I get the fear. Like I understand it. And particularly those in the audience who are like on Social Security. We have a member on Patreon right now whose Social Security payment is 2 days late. Like these are real concerns. Okay. And simultaneously making decisions about, like, let's just say hypothetically your entire retirement on the basis of fear about what they could do in 3 months or 6 months or 2 years is probably not the most grounded decision-making spot. Okay. So I just want to caution everybody to be careful. Be careful about the decisions you are making right now. Okay. And stay grounded. Because as I've been saying for like a very long time, you've got to stay grounded in reality right now. What they want is for us to be constantly dysregulated, scared, and panicking. Because then we don't organize, then we don't talk to each other, we isolate ourselves because we're afraid, and that means they win. So connect, whether that means connecting with your accountant or your financial professionals, whether that means connecting with people who love you, okay? And making sure that you are getting good advice and that you are filtering it through the lens of like, is this the best decision for me right now? Right? Is this a decision that makes sense for my future? That, by the way, applies to everything, not just like this little universe of like money that we're talking about. Okay. And again, I'm not offering financial advice. Please make no mistake about it. Liability disclaimer, bing, 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 bing. Okay. Don't take any advice from me about what to do with your money. So again, the best advice I have right now from an emotional standpoint is to please get grounded. And that may mean logging off for a couple of days. Okay. And if you need to evaluate where you are in relation to any aspect of your life, it's much better to do it when you're not being triggered by all the insanity that's happening inside the federal government. Okay. Really critical to just focus. Okay. Like focus on yourself, your needs. If you're dysregulated, what's going to comfort you? Who can you talk to? Who do you need to go have coffee with? How can you get yourself into a better headspace? All right. And like, I'm trying to do this every day for at least a little bit of time, because otherwise we all become overwhelmed. All right. Okay. That's it for today. It is Friday. For our Patreon subscribers, there will be a progressive coffee hour on Sunday, probably around 1 o'clock, like we've been doing it there. So if you want to join us for progressive coffee hour, which is our much more free for all, ask me anything kind of event for our Patreon subscribers only, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a subscriber. And I will see you on Sunday afternoon. Otherwise, I will catch you all here on Monday at regular time. Actually, wait, Monday is President's Day and my kids are off school. Okay. Stay tuned on whether I will be here on Monday or not. Big question mark. Okay. I will let everybody know on the Patreon feed and on Blue Sky and also in the comments, the post section, the community section on YouTube here, one way or another, so you know what's coming. All right. Lots of love to all of you. Please take some time this weekend to do something that makes you feel good, right? Joy is not lost, and do something that's comforting and nourishing to your spirit. Okay. So critical for all of us to get through it that way. All right. Lots of love, everybody. I will see you all here really soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right. As much as you can. All right. Bye.